Welcome to the Strategic Leader podcast with me, Gemma Bullivant, and my co-host, Fiona Craig. This podcast is for HR professionals and people-focused leaders from any function who want to think, act, and feel naturally more strategic. Enjoy the show.
Hi everyone, welcome back to The Strategic Leader. It's great to have you back with us. Hi Gem, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thanks, Finn. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm very much looking forward to today's episode because I think I'll probably learn a thing or two from it. Last time we talked about people pleasing, which was kind of in your ballpark, wasn't it? And today we are going to be talking about procrastination, which I think is somewhat more in my ballpark. Would you agree?
Well, I couldn't possibly comment on you and your ways, but I don't necessarily relate so much to procrastination. I think I do clearly kick things down the lane from time to time, and I do have my moments, but I wouldn't say it's a trait that immediately comes to mind for me. But I think what we need to do really is understand what we mean by procrastination, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. So I would describe it as delaying or avoiding something that would ideally be carried out in the present. So if we could do something now, but we're not doing something now, that's probably procrastination. There's no other rational reason for not doing it now. But clearly there are going to be lots of subconscious or irrational reasons why we're not doing it now. We're all prone to kicking cans down the road, which I completely agree with. And I think that there is evidence that suggests around about 25% of adults would identify themselves as procrastinators. But there's definitely a line, isn't there? Do I identify as a procrastinator in that it's a blocker to my strategic capacity? Or is it just, we're all a bit overwhelmed sometimes. We've all got a bit too much to do and tasks get left at the bottom of the inbox. So I think what we're talking about today is that 25% of us who kind of identify as procrastinators, that we recognize that there are tasks that maybe rationally we could do now, but for some reason we are delaying or avoiding doing them. And that reason goes beyond laziness. And it also goes beyond not being capable of the tasks. I think it's quite important to say that when we have procrastination techniques, it's not about our capacity to do the task at hand, and it's not about being lazy. And it's funny because, I would say that I'm quite prone to procrastination at times, but equally, I think somebody from the outside might look and go, yeah, but Fee, you do so much stuff. You get loads of stuff done. And I do. I definitely get lots of stuff done. I have lots of fingers in lots of pies and I do things. But there are certain tasks that totally trip me up from a procrastination point of view. So it's not everything, there's certain things. And it might be helpful to think, well, what are those certain things? Try and understand what's going on and not beating ourselves up, which I think is actually really common to say, oh, don't be so lazy or don't be so stupid, just get on with it. I think, as in with many things that we've talked about, there's a real need for compassion here because there is something going on that's below the surface. And if we want to move past it, we have to shine a bit of a light on that thing with compassion. Otherwise, it's just not helpful. We're not going to be able to find that cause and deal with it.
Yeah, I do agree with the definition that you've provided. I've seen it described in a slightly different way, but broadly saying the same thing, which is when the drive to delay is stronger than the drive to act. And I like that description as well, because it's almost suggesting that there is something going on that's prompting us to delay rather than prompting us to act. And when that tension shows up, when that friction shows up, that's when procrastination kicks in. So it's not necessarily about just having too much to do and not having the time to do it. It's beyond that. It's more to do with the drive to delay rather than the drive to act. And there could be so many different reasons for that, because I think, as with a lot of these terms, procrastination is a really broad term. And it's not really about tackling procrastination. It's about understanding the drives behind what's causing the delay that then might just be able to help us to act more decisively, more confidently, more quickly as needed in the situation.
Absolutely. And you said tension and friction. And I think, there's a tendency to think of procrastination as like lying on the sofa doing nothing. And, for sure it will on occasion show up like that. But I think often procrastination can be a very active thing, which is that actually I am avoiding it by doing a whole heap of other stuff. So, never has the dishwasher being emptied been so attractive or the washing hung out on the line, or never has it been so important that I do my timesheets or that I go and check in with that person or fill up the paper in the photocopier, all of these kinds of things. We can find ourselves filling the gap with something very, very active.
Reminding me of school days when you'd actually spend hours on a revision timetable rather than the revision itself.
Oh, gems. We didn't quite know each other in those days, but that sounds very familiar to me. I love the coloured post-its and the and the coloured highlighters. But in terms of what it is that we're trying to find when we do these other things that we wouldn't find in the main task itself, there can be lots of things that we're looking for. We might be looking for pleasure or reward or
Mhm.
comfort. We might be looking for a dopamine hit or something that makes us feel good about ourselves. We might be trying to avoid feeling bored with something. We might be trying to avoid the risk that we might fail at something,
Mm.
especially if we're thinking at a strategic level. Some of the tasks that we have to do in terms of documents we have to write, thinking we have to do, presentations we have to make, there isn't a right answer. Okay. So the task can be quite difficult in terms of kicking it off, staying the course, explaining it to other people. Some of these tasks aren't going to land. People aren't going to understand us or they don't agree with us. So the risk of failure is it depends how you frame failure, of course, but the risk of this not landing in the way you want it to is probably quite high when you're thinking strategically. And we may already start with low self-confidence, the idea that it'll probably go a bit wrong. And I think this can definitely get in the way of our aim to be more of a strategic leader, because procrastinators generally don't necessarily perform and live into their full capacity. They can be less efficient. They can take more time. They can get fewer things done. There is also a link between procrastination and anxiety, depression, and stress, which is not necessarily the work of this conversation here today, but just to kind of bear in mind that there is a link with those things. So if somebody suddenly starts procrastinating when it's not a core characteristic of theirs, it might just be worth checking in with how they are doing. But it is something that can get in the way of your strategic capacity. And therefore, it's worth looking into that dark corner, shining a torch into that dark corner to say what is going on, because
Mm.
definitely possible to deal with it. It's definitely possible to challenge yourself to figure out what is going on here and get some skills, some habits, some techniques to challenge that behavior
Yeah.
and say, actually, it is getting in the way of me being a really good leader. Therefore, I want to find a way around it. And hopefully, over the course of the next few minutes, we'll talk about some of those techniques and ideas and pointers for how to do it.
Yes,
We've
it's
talked about the fact this is not necessarily one of your core blockers for you, Jem, but it kind of is more for me. But where does it show up for you when you do procrastinate? How does it kind of show up?
well, the most typical time I can identify with procrastinating would be when I find a task quite dull.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so housework often gets put off, or decluttering, or doing things around the house that are really quite tedious in my view.
Mhm.
Those sorts of tasks definitely get delayed. I think so that's pleasure seeking in its absolute prime. I'm looking for something far more interesting to do than the task I really should be doing at
Mm.
this point in time.
Yeah.
So when something is really dull is probably number 1 for me. The other ones I think are related. It's to do with whether something is either really difficult and I just can't quite get my head round how to even start with it, or more commonly, when I just have way too much on my plate and I almost get that sense of overwhelm of not knowing what to do first. and then I end up doing none of them, as opposed to just getting on with the things that I need to get on with. So they're probably the three types of procrastination I would say I do the most, is when it's dull, or when it's difficult, or when I've got too much on my plate.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, that feels, they all feel very familiar to me. Definitely the overwhelm one. I think sometimes I feel a bit like a child, a child in a park that's trying to catch a pigeon or something. And there's a whole bunch of pigeons on the ground. And
Oh,
the
yes.
toddler will run into the middle trying to catch one. Um,
Usually really close to me, because I have a bird phobia. I don't know if you even knew this about me, but
Bird phobia.
um,
Maybe is that a blocker we should be talking about, Jen? But you run in trying to catch all these 10, 20 pigeons
yes.
and end up
Yeah.
none of them. You catch none of them. They just sort of all disperse.
Yeah.
That one sounds very, very familiar to me. So lack of focus on which one is the most important. And this one very much goes back to many of the conversations we've had about being a strategic leader, around tapping into that sense of detachment or kind of perspective to say, okay, there's lots of tasks here. Some of them are going to have more value than others. So which
Mm,
one can only be done by me? Which is the one that will have the biggest impact? Which are the ones that can either wait or can be done by someone else or are going to have less impact? So where there's no clear focus definitely shows up for me. Where I don't know where to start would be another thing.
mm,
And again,
mm,
I've experienced this many times when I'm trying to write some kind of strategic paper, some document or some sort of presentation, and I don't quite know where to start. That is another one, big one for procrastination for me, or where I don't quite know where I need to end up. If I don't quite know where I'm going or what the expectations are, that can be another one that really, really slows me
mm.
down. I can start it, but I'm like, well, I don't quite know where I need to end up. So it worries me to start. But yeah, same as you, dull ones. Oh my God, dull tasks. I have got better at it. But I know for myself, I'm seeking a dopamine hit. And I know I'm not going to get the dopamine hit from cleaning the shower screen, but I
Mhm.
will. So, well, where am I going to get a dopamine hit from? Why would anybody clean a shower screen, right? You clean a shower screen because when you look through it and the sun shines through it, it looks really good. And
Mm.
that's the bit I want to see. I want the sun to shine through it. I want the room to feel bigger. I want to feel like my bathroom resembles more like a hotel bathroom than a student's bathroom.
Yeah.
Those are the things that are going to give me a dopamine hit. And so I've learned with those dull tasks to go, okay, there's clearly no dopamine hit to be had from cleaning a shower screen, but there is one to be had from having a clean shower screen. If you see what I mean, it's quite a
Yeah.
fine difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've had to kind of unpick that and say, yes, it's dull. What is not dull about this task?
Yeah. It's like psychology, motivation theory 101, isn't it? Focusing on the benefit of doing something in
Yeah.
order to get you through the process of getting to that benefit.
Yes, absolutely. It's seeking that motivation. If
Yeah.
this task doesn't motivate me, there must be something about it. Otherwise, why on earth would I do it? So let's
Mm,
find that
mm.
something. That really helps me.
And I think one of the things that can really help, reflecting on that definition of when the drive to delay is stronger than the drive to act,
Mhm.
is to think, okay, so what's going on there? Why is my drive to delay so strong here? And starting to really identify how it shows up for you and why that drive to delay is so strong in that moment. It's not about, attaching a label that says, well, I procrastinate, so therefore that's what's going on there. Is actually to say, no, 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 no. This is about a behavior that's going on here.
Mhm.
So what is it that's going on that's causing me to want to delay on this task? Because the delay, the drive to delay might be legitimate. You may not have enough information. You may need to think about it a bit more and get the balance right of critical thinking and making sound and informed decisions versus quick thinking and decisive action. And where does procrastination fall amongst all of that? At what point are we giving something our full strategic thinking potential, and at what point are we actually just holding on to it for too long and therefore procrastinating. So I think it's really important for us to identify exactly how it shows up for us in that moment, and it might be that you might have various reasons, but you talked about the drive to not clean the shower screen is really the whole process of cleaning the shower screen is dull and probably not the most pleasant thing we can do. But we know that ultimately that's what's causing that drive to delay. So we just need to get over that by focusing on how we will feel once we've done it.
Yeah, I think
Am I
that's
making sense there?
yeah, I think that's a really key thing to hang on to. Because I guess not all procrastinations aren't all all created equally, right? They can be, we've talked about lots of different reasons why you are avoiding, but each one of those reasons has its own solution built in, really, doesn't it?
Yes.
So it could be I'm avoiding starting this because I don't actually know how to start it. And
Mm,
so the solution for that one might be, okay, do I need to get a clearer brief from somebody? Do I need to agree that I'm just going to have a thought dump and then we're going to have a conversation and then I'm going to go away and tidy it up again? Do I need to engage a thinking partner who's just going to put some structure around my thinking and fire some great
mm,
questions at me? I mean, this is a technique I use a lot when I don't quite know what it is I'm trying to create. I'd say, well, who's it for? And what other questions they're likely to ask me about it?
mm,
So, what problem are we trying to solve? How do we know we've got this problem? What's change we're trying to make? Who needs to be involved? Well, those kinds of questions just sort of ask me questions to sort of help get me moving if I was imagining talking
mm,
to somebody else. So if it's like I don't know where to start, there are a number of solutions that we can put in place. If it's like, okay, I'm afraid of failure, it's okay, well, can we explore what we think failure might look like? What does that actually mean? Is it that I'm going to get the wrong answer? Is it that I'm going to look daft? Is it that I am not capable of this task? Depending on what that is, what are your mitigating actions going to be? If
mm,
it's this task is so dull, I absolutely hate it. It makes me feel ill just contemplating it. Well, where can I find the joy? Where can I find the reward? How can I reward myself when I've done it? How can I
mm,
motivate myself through this task?
mm,
Um, to knuckle down, I know we've got a couple of techniques around that, but it starts by understanding, yeah, that drive to delay and yeah, detaching back to that word. Say, I notice that I am procrastinating here. There must be some reason why I'm doing that. What could that reason be? And depending on what the answer is, what are the steps that I can take to help me through it? Well, what's the impact of me not doing this? And again, thinking strategically, what's the most important thing that I need to be thinking about? And if I don't think about this stuff, who's going to think about it? A lot of this stuff won't quite have a deadline because it might be the more shapeless pieces of work. It can be
mm,
really tempting, I've noticed, certainly from listening to coachees, that when we have a task that's kind of maybe quite big or shapeless, as strategic tasks often are, we can be really magnetically drawn back into our tactical land of just
mm,
doing tasks. And those tasks might be the more tactical things. They might be the tasks that actually belong in your previous role. They might be the tasks that your team are more than capable of doing themselves without you. But we retreat into them because we feel comfortable in that space. We know how to do them. They have a clear start and finish point. We can tick them off our lists.
and they also have that dopamine hits. We are pleasure seeking, as creatures,
Yes.
and we need to remember that and acknowledge that and then sort of work with that. And it's very easy for us to rely on willpower and then beat ourselves up when willpower lets us down. And so I prefer to think about it in terms of actually, what are the systems that I need to put in place so that my willpower muscle is less relied upon?
That's a great one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of talk about that idea in James Clear's Atomic Habits, isn't there? What are the
Yeah.
systems that you put in place so that you don't have to rely upon your willpower?
And I think we do need to think about this as habit change. And James Clear's Atomic Habits is a fantastic book. Basically, a habit is a behavior that we do regularly. And so building systems is something that James Clear recommends, isn't it, to
Mhm.
support an activity that maybe we don't find it that easy to do habitually. So if we are often distracted by social media,
Mm.
and we know that that's getting in the way of doing an important task, and that's kind of maybe something that's going on in our procrastination world, we need to do something with that phone, maybe. Switch it off, put it in a different room, give ourselves a defined period of time where we're not able to habitually reach for the phone, and that will help us for that willpower to kick in. It's sort of a something less for that willpower to have to work on if we cannot reach for the phone.
And yeah, I mean, James Clear talks about put obstacles in the way of the things that you don't want to do, like exactly as
Mm,
you described, put your phone somewhere else, even just out of
mm,
reach, in a
mm,
bag, whatever it might be. Move your apps to the very last screen, so you have to scroll through 5 pages to get to it. Put obstacles in the way of the actions that you don't want to take, and remove obstacles from the actions that you do want to take.
mm,
I
mm.
know that you and I have each got a technique that we use relating to frogs and tomatoes. Do you want to go first and share yours, Jem? Because it really does sound quite disgusting.
So the one I really like is eat the frog. And this is an idea whereby the frog represents the most important task you've got to do in that day, or perhaps the scariest task, and they don't necessarily have to be the same thing. But certainly the thing that by the end of the day, if you've done nothing else, you've done that. And so that's what the frog represents. So find your hardest task, or the task that scares you the most, or from a strategic perspective, the most important task for you to tackle that day. And I bet you it isn't checking your social media or checking your emails, for sure. Yes. So identify the frog and then eat it. Hmm.
Well,
Uh,
I know that rather disgusting expression. I know that does work because when I remember to do that one, I have an issue with remembering that one, but when I do remember it, it always works. The other thing that I know about that one is if you have to eat a frog, eat it for breakfast. So get it out of the way because then you've got the whole of the rest of the day will feel like smooth sailing.
day.
Yeah, you're flooded with kind of reward hormones, and so the rest of the day is really nice. But yeah, that whole thing does sound a bit disgusting, doesn't it? But I think it's very powerful, and
Yeah.
certainly from a strategic perspective, it's what is the thing that is most important to do today.
You get the benefit of the dopamine for as much of the rest of the day, which is a lovely feeling. And if the frog that you've eaten actually was your scary task and was causing you a bit of anxiety or
Yeah.
concern or worry, then you have then taken that worry out of the rest of the day. You've lifted that weight, if you like, and that can then free up your mind, free up your capacity to do your other things. So, whether it's the most important thing and you get a sense of achievement from that, or the scariest thing, the thing that's really concerning you, in which case you lift the weight of that concern, either of those things, I think, is why I really like the eat the frog idea.
Yeah, yeah.
So where do tomatoes come into this,
Toma
Lee?
Tomatoes come in terms of the Pomodoro technique,
Oh, yeah.
which lots of people know this one, and technically, if you don't know it, it's named after one of those slightly retro kitchen timers that look like a tomato and you twist them round to the time that you want. And the idea is that we break our task or our working time into Pomodoros, which is 25 minutes worth of work and 5 minutes worth of break. And,
Mm,
and so, for example, you might break your morning up into 3 or 4 Pomodoros, or you might break your task into I'll do this across 2 Pomodoros or 4 Pomodoros or something. You're breaking it up into if I can keep my head down and work for 25 minutes, then I can have a break. Um,
mm,
so I know this doesn't work for everybody. It does work for me. Sometimes 25 minutes is actually embarrassingly, sometimes 25 minutes is too long. So yesterday I was doing this and I did it in 15 minutes and it was a task that was really difficult. It's sort of admin task. And I was like, come on, you've got to be able to do 15 minutes worth.
Mm.
Let's see if we can. How would you feel if this task was finished in 15 minutes? So I'd set it for 15. And I didn't, it took me 3 goes to finish it because it was actually quite a bigger task than I thought. But every time I was like, yes, I can absolutely get my head down for 15 minutes and take a big chunk out of
Mm.
this. So it technically Pomodoro technique is based around 25 minutes and 5 minutes. You can, of course, set up the timing as you wish. But I find that really good one because it gives you little dopamine hits that get you going. So it's not like your whole day is going to be split into 15 or 25-minute chunks. It
No.
takes 2, maybe 3, and you will have made enough progress for momentum to carry you through the rest of it.
I mean, it might be because procrastination isn't as much of a trait that holds me back as some of the other ones that we talk about,
Yeah.
but I've never really found it that helpful, and I
Mhm.
think I just need to get going on something, and then I can actually find myself quite focused for quite some time, and the timer going off completely breaks that focus. I suppose if I'm cleaning the shower, I probably need Pomodoro, but if I'm trying to access my creative juices and my strategic thinking, if I'm trying to force that through a 25-minute tomato timer, I don't get the feels on that at all.
That doesn't work for you. Well, we're each to his own, eh? I don't have a tomato timer, but I've many times been tempted to buy one and put it on my desk because I do like it. But I think your point about just get started is a really good one when it comes to procrastination, because often we can mentally turn the task into something far bigger than it actually is.
Mm,
Once we put it off
mm,
once, put it off twice, it can sort of take on a life of its own as being some kind of monster of a task.
mm.
And just to start, just to break
Yes.
the tyranny of the blank page, just to get some subheads in, just to get a crappy sketch down, just to write a first sentence, just to give yourself permission to do a really crap job. Again, this is another, actually, you just reminded me of another way that I've used either Pomodoro 25 minutes or indeed just 10 minutes, which is like, if I only had 10 minutes to do this task, if I genuinely had to do this task in 10 minutes,
Mm,
what would I do?
mm.
Um, and actually, that is quite motivating for me because I quite like a deadline. I quite like the kind of adrenaline of a sort of crisis. And I go, well, if I genuinely only had 10 minutes, I could probably do something.
Yes.
So even if it was only write down 10 bullets, I could do that. So
Mm.
that, again, it's just a place to start, isn't it? So that's another thing to think about. Just give yourself permission to do a crap job would be another technique that we can
Just get
lead you.
started.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
get started. Just get
Yes. Just
something
get
down and then
started.
refine it later. So I feel
Yes.
like, in contrast to the world of procrastination, I feel like we've made some pretty good progress through this idea, this particular blocker to our strategic skill, which is this idea about procrastination. I know that some people probably won't experience it, but others will experience it a lot.
And I think it's important for us to just acknowledge that it's a behavior that we can change. It's a habit. It is something that we can identify and choose to address, choose to tackle, so long as we do it in the right way and we figure out what it is that's causing that drive to delay. And then we need to focus and practice the different perspective, the different behavior, the different response that we want to see instead of that delay behavior.
Absolutely. And I think it all starts with noticing what's going on with compassion. I
Mm,
notice there's some procrastination going on here, exploring it a little bit, what lies beneath it, and then going, do I want to be in this position or do I want to get the thing done? I actually prefer to have,
mm, mm,
and then what needs to happen in order to get it done. But I think
mm,
that noticing with compassion, as with so many of these things, is where we start.
mm. Very good. Well, I hope that there's been something of use there and that it unblocks something for you in relation to showing up more strategically and flexing that strategic muscle. Thanks for a great conversation, Fee.
Thank you too, Jem. Thanks to everyone for listening.
Until next time, thanks for that. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Strategic Leader. If you liked the episode, please subscribe to access more of our recordings. And if you think it'd be useful for someone else, please forward to them and leave a review. We base our content on questions we are regularly asked and what you want to know more about, so please do email us with any questions or comments to gemma@gemmabullivant.co.uk. And remember, you're already being more strategic than you realise.